So the Labour MP David Lammy went on the Andrew Marr Show and decided to call Brexiteers Nazi.
Implication, you're comparing the ERG to the Nazi party, or at least to the South African racists. Now, whatever you think about the ERG, that was an unacceptable comparison, wasn't it?
Andrew, I would say that wasn't strong enough. In
Really?
1938, there were allies who hatched a plan for Hitler to annex part of Czechoslovakia, and Churchill said no, and he stood alone.
He did.
We must not appease. We're in a situation now, and let me just be clear, I'm an ethnic minority.
So what? I am too, and I'm a Brexiteer. What's that got to do with anything?
They're happy to use the phrase Grand Wizard. KKK is what it evokes to me when I think of that phrase, and the Deep South.
Firstly, this came from a tweet that Laura Kuenssberg sent out, and it's never been clarified who actually said this. In fact, Laura later on clarified on her own tweet, saying, "Just catching up on timeline. For avoidance of doubt, a couple of insiders told me using the nickname informally. No intended connection to anything else." And since then, the RG and Brexiteers have already said that they didn't actually create this nickname for themselves, and it's never been formalized. No one has been calling them that. Someone during that meeting, outside the actual meeting, told Laura Kuenssberg that the ERG are basically like the Grand Wizards. It's not the same as them being KKK.
And the Grand Wizard stuff, we don't know where that came from. It's a dangerous thing, surely, to accuse him of being close to Nazi ideology.
We do know that Boris Johnson is with Steve Bannon, who is a white supremacist.
Firstly, it's Steve Bannon, not Banyan. He doesn't even know who he's talking about. Secondly, Boris Johnson has replied to David Lammy's crazy rant. Whatever you may think of my time as mayor in London's City Hall, or as Foreign Secretary, I don't think you could say that it amounted to a fascist regime. As for the so-called association with Steve Bannon, I'm afraid this is a lefty delusion. And to be fair, he's right. Of course, I met Mr. Bannon a couple of times when I was Foreign Secretary, and he was Trump's Chief of Staff, but not since. That's the whole point. Bannon at the time was Chief of Staff to Donald Trump. These were just formal meetings that were happening regardless of who Foreign Secretary was at the time. Doesn't mean they are best friends.
I'm not backing off on this. Never will I back off on this on behalf of my constituents, and the BBC should not allow this extreme hard right fascism to flourish. And often these are elected
side of Conservative MPs.
I don't care how elected they were. So was the far right in Germany. They're often elected, often giving a cover for the thugs on the ground.
I mean, aside from the fact that he's comparing Nazis and fascists who were anti-democracy and pro-big government to Brexiteers who are pro-democracy and anti-big government, it's astonishing that he's saying just because the Nazis at some point were elected, it's basically the same scenario. I do have a better example for him, similar to the Nazis. Socialists and communists. They are now hiding behind the banner of social democracy and social democrats. The same people whose ideology was simply about taking over people's lives, having the big state telling us what to do and how to live our lives. First they tried a different method, just to take over. Then they decided, well, it's not working out quite well, so let's inject some democracy into it. Let's basically take part in elections in any country that we're in. Doesn't mean they are now suddenly nice people. Socialists are still socialists. Whether they're National Socialists, Nazis, or fascists in Italy, it's all the same thing. It's all collectivism.
This is what a second referendum is going to be like day after day, week after week. What kind of country are we going to be like at the end of this process?
What kind of country are we going to be like if these people are running it? What kind of country are we going to be like when we head into a leadership race and some of them get their hands on the levers of the country? Where will this stop, Andrew?
Well, a country whose people will be allowed to hire and fire their own politicians, a country that will have a system where power is localized rather than being dictated to by a bureaucratic body from a different country, and a country that's more global and pro-free trade instead of being in a protectionist continental bloc.
It may be that you will be fine in that country, but many of my constituents will not, and that's why I stand firm.
You would say that Tory MPs like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg are equivalent to Nazis?
Ask Boris Johnson why he's hanging out with Steve Bannon.
Again, it's Steve Bannon, not Banyan, and no, he's not hanging out with him.
Ask him that question, because he shouldn't
Because, you see, you're sticking by that proposition. A lot of people watching this will be absolutely outraged by that.
I don't care how outraged they are. I think that'll be a minority.
I don't know what we're yelling about! Loud noises!
If they've got any sense. Because British soldiers in this country died fighting this thuggery and extremism. And here we are in 2019, and people are bringing it into the mainstream for their own political advantage. Absolutely not.
What's funny is that these Remainers constantly go around saying that the other side and some people who use foul language and insults, we should stand up to it, and it's not right for people to call politicians or anyone Nazi if they're not. For example, we had this from Anna Soubry.
You have to be absolutely... I do object to being called a Nazi, actually.
Right. Well, apologies to you if you're offended by what you're listening to.
I just think this is astonishing. This is what has happened to our country, actually. This is what's happened to our country. But anyway.
Now, the people who are shouting Nazi at Anna Soubry are clearly idiots. But this happened afterwards. Police investigation after Brexit protesters call Anna Soubry a Nazi. Police investigation after Anna Soubry branded Nazi by protesters outside Parliament. And then, man arrested after abuse of British pro-EU lawmaker Soubry. So basically, the people who called Anna Soubry Nazi were investigated by the police, and they were arrested by the police. I wonder if the same applies to David Lammy. If we don't see any investigation by the police, then this is a clear bias from the state and from the establishment. If you want to have the same legal requirements when it comes to everyone in the country, it does have to apply to everyone in the country. Now, will we see David Lammy being arrested by the police? Highly unlikely. Well, thanks again, as usual, for watching this. If you enjoy the content, make sure you like, comment and share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow with a new video.